In a city where marble floors shine brighter than compassion, and gold chandeliers hang heavier than empathy, one woman walked into a lobby and faced something far colder than the rain outside prejudice. But she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any outburst. If stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think deeper about the world we live in, don't forget to subscribe. These are the voices that often go unheard. Until now. The rain fell in a soft, persistent drizzle, more a whisper than a storm slicking the sidewalks of downtown, like the city was crying without wanting to make a scene. Traffic lights blinked red and green against the wet pavement. Horns blared in frustration. Somewhere in the distance, a saxophone played from the subway stairs, its notes floating into the gray of evening. Inside the Wellington Grand Hotel, however, the world seemed sealed away from all that. Warm, elegant, protected, the lobby looked like a movie set, golden light pouring from chandeliers, polished marble floors that reflected every heel click and shadow, walls lined with fresh orchids, and bellhops in pressed uniforms moving luggage with silent precision. A fireplace flickered in the corner, although it was barely cold. A couple by the concierge sipped wine. Soft jazz played overhead. Everything smelled faintly of lemon oil and money. Then the doors slid open. A tall woman stepped inside, shaking rain from her long coat. She wasn't drenched, but the mist clung to her, like she'd walked through a memory. Her coat was dark, almost navy, long enough to brush her knees. A silk scarf framed her face, tied carefully around a bun at the nape of her neck. She pulled a dark brown suitcase behind her, nothing flashy, but sturdy and well-used, the kind of bag that had been through more than one airport. She paused in the doorway, just for a second. The lights caught her face. Her skin was a rich shade of brown, smooth despite the day's fatigue. Her eyes scanned the room, not timidly, but with quiet awareness. She saw the doorman not look up, saw a man in a suit glance at her and look away quickly, saw the blonde woman near the fireplace shift her purse closer. She walked in anyway. Her boots tapped steadily across the marble as she approached the front desk. The man behind it looked up. His name tag read Derek, mid-20s, clean-shaven. His hotel-issued blazer looked a size too big. He glanced at her for half a second before his eyes dropped back to the computer screen like he hadn't seen anything of interest. "Yes?" he said flatly, fingers still hovering over the keyboard. The woman stopped directly in front of him. She waited until he looked up again. "I have a reservation," she said. "Camille Hart." He nodded without smiling. Started typing. Click. Click, click. "Could you spell that?" A-O-T. More typing. A slight frown appeared between his eyebrows. "I'm not seeing anything. Are you sure you booked at this location?" "Yes," she said, unfazed. "Downtown. Wellington Grand. Confirmation number ending in 7298. Camille pulled out her phone, already open to the email. She handed it across the counter. Derek barely looked at it, scanned the top. Didn't scroll. Just handed it back. "There might have been a system error," he said, tapping aimlessly at the keyboard again. "But unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight. Every room." His eyes didn't meet hers. He was already glancing past her to the next guest in line. Camille held her ground. "I'd like to speak with your manager," she said calmly. Derek froze for half a beat. "He's in a meeting right now. And just so you're aware," his tone shifted, just slightly sharper, "our hotel policy allows us to refuse service if we feel a guest doesn't meet certain standards." Her eyes didn't flinch. Her expression didn't change. "What standards would those be?" she asked. He didn't answer. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. a white woman in pearls and a cream-colored trench coat. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Derek's face softened immediately. "No, ma'am. Just a small mix-up. I'll be right with you." The woman looked at Camille, eyes narrowing like she was trying to guess whether Camille was here to sell something, ask for help, or maybe complain about the food. Whatever she assumed, it wasn't guessed. Camille stepped aside, not out of defeat, but to remove herself from the performance. She wasn't going to beg for what was already hers. She set her bag upright beside her and reached into her coat pocket. What she pulled out wasn't loud, wasn't angry. It was quiet, simple, and devastating. A business card. She walked back to the counter, laid the card down gently, and slid it across the polished surface. Derek picked it up, almost with a sigh, like this would be the end of the inconvenience. His eyes dropped to the gold lettering. They stopped, then widened, then blinked. The change was immediate. Camille Hart, Chief Executive Officer, Hartwell Hospitality Group. His lips parted. He looked up at her like he was just now seeing a real person. His mouth opened again, but no words came. The elevator dinged behind them. From it stepped a tall man in a navy suit, phone in hand. His eyes scanned the lobby, then froze when they landed on the scene in front of him. He tucked the phone into his pocket and rushed forward. "Miss Hart," he said, breath short. I didn't know you'd be visiting this location. We weren't informed. This is a terrible misunderstanding." Camille turned to him slowly. Her expression was still calm, but something had sharpened in her voice. "It's not a misunderstanding," she said. "It's a decision, a reflex, and it's not mine." Silence fell over the lobby like fog. The woman in pearls had gone quiet. The bellhop stopped adjusting his cart. Even the couple by the concierge looked over now. No one said anything. No one moved. Camille picked up her suitcase. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten, didn't explain, but she did lean forward, just enough for the manager to hear. "Tonight, it seems I don't meet your standard," she said softly. "But tomorrow, I imagine this hotel may not meet mine." She walked away, out into the rain. The automatic doors closed behind her with a hush. And somehow, that silence felt louder than anything she could have said. Outside, the rain had quieted into a misty curtain. But inside the Wellington Grand, tension still hung in the air like fog after lightning. The doors had barely finished sliding shut behind Camille Hart before Derek, the front desk agent, felt his stomach twist. He was still holding the business card, his fingers now damp from nervous sweat. He couldn't stop staring at it. Camille Hart, CEO, Hartwell Hospitality Group, not a guest. Not just some woman walking in from the street. The woman. The one whose company partially owned this very building. His cheeks flushed with sudden heat. How could he have known? She hadn't looked like a CEO. Not the way he'd been taught to picture one anyway. No tailored suit. No designer purse. No sharp-heeled stilettos. She walked in like someone who'd been traveling, not like someone who belonged at the top of a billion-dollar corporation. And yes, he realized it now. Her skin color had spoken louder to him than her composure ever could. He didn't say that out loud, of course. He didn't even let himself fully think it. But the weight of it pressed on his chest. The manager, Mr. Lorne, was still standing there, eyes wide as if someone had just told him he'd been audited. He looked at Derek like he might explode. "Why didn't you check her properly?" He hissed in a low voice, barely controlling himself. I did," Derek stammered. "Her name wasn't in the system. She had the confirmation number." Lorne snapped. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. "Do you even understand who she is?" Derek nodded, slowly. "Now I do." Lorne pinched the bridge of his nose. "God help us." From the fireplace, the woman in pearls was still watching, pretending not to listen all clearly hanging on every word. Two bellhops had paused mid-conversation. Across the lobby, one of them mouthed, "Camille Hart?" To the other, "Go get your things," Lauren said, barely concealing his panic. "Go home for the night. I'll deal with this. But now." Derek left the counter, shoulders hunched, heart pounding. As he walked toward the staff door, he could feel everyone's eyes follow him, not with curiosity, but that awful blend of suspicion and judgment. It was exactly how he had looked at her, and now he hated the taste of it. Meanwhile, Camille stood just outside the hotel, under the awning. She didn't rush to call a car, didn't fumble for her phone or check the time. She just stood there. For a moment, watching the drops of rain hang from the edge of the awning like little glass daggers. A woman passed by and slowed, noticing the suitcase. "Are you okay, Mom? Need help with anything?" Camille turned to her with a soft smile. "No, thank you. Just needed a bit of air." The woman smiled back, nodded, and disappeared into the crowd. Camille took a long breath and walked down the street, not hurried, not hesitant. Her presence had shifted something in that lobby. She could feel it. It wasn't a storm she left behind. It was a mirror. And now, they were all forced to look into it. Back in the lobby, the atmosphere was stiff. Even the music had stopped, or maybe someone had turned it off. Guests were still murmuring, looking around, whispering behind hands. Lauren retreated to the back office with a clipboard in hand, but everyone knew it was a flimsy cover to avoid further questions. It wasn't just a mistake. It was an assumption. And not a harmless one. 2 hours later, in the staff break room, Janice, the head housekeeper, sat quietly eating a granola bar. She had been at the Wellington Grand for 12 years. She'd seen owners come and go. She'd seen rude guests, entitled celebrities, sweet old ladies who left handwritten thank you notes. She had also seen a lot of people like Camille get turned away before they could even reach the desk. Most weren't CEOs. Most didn't have business cards. Most just left. That was the part that bothered her. "I told them years ago they needed proper training on bias," she muttered to herself. But nobody listens to housekeeping. Luis, one of the bellhops, sat across from her, playing with his lanyard. "Do you think he's going to get fired?" he asked, referring to Derek. Janice shrugged. "Don't know, but it's not just about him. He's part of something bigger. Most people are too scared to say it, but you saw the way folks looked at her when she walked in. You felt it. I felt it." Louise nodded, slowly. She was calm, though, like she knew exactly how this would go. She's probably had it happen her whole damn life, Janice said quietly. And the more powerful she became, the quieter her anger got. They sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of the fridge filling the room. Then Louise added, "She didn't yell, didn't make a scene. That's what got me." "That's because people like her, like us, we don't get to throw fits and still get respect," Janice said. "We play chess while the world's playing checkers." Later that evening, upstairs, in a suite that had been vacated just for her, though she'd never asked for it, Camille stood by the window, looking down at the glowing city. She hadn't come to make a statement. She was just in town for a site visit. Her executive assistant had booked the stay weeks ago. She'd picked Wellington Grand because she wanted to test the waters discreetly, not with cameras, not with name tags or photo ops. Just as a regular woman checking in. But now it was a story. And she didn't even have to tell it. The story had written itself, not in headlines, but in looks, in tone, in doubt. She took off her coat and folded it neatly over the armchair. Her scarf, too. Underneath, she wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans. Not flashy, not CEO chic. Just Camille. She sat at the writing desk by the bed and opened her laptop. Typed out one sentence in an email to her communications director. No public response necessary. Let the system speak for itself. Then she clicked send, closed the laptop, and sat back in her chair. From her purse, she took out a small leather journal and a pen. She opened to a blank page. At the top, she wrote in clean cursive, "The assumption is the oldest lie in the book." Then, she underlined it twice and began to write. The storm hadn't returned, but the night had shifted. The city was no longer buzzing. It was humming low, like a warning. The sidewalks gleamed under streetlights, washed in rain and reflection. The Wellington Grand, meanwhile, stood still as a statue too elegant to flinch, too proud to notice the cracks in its marble. But upstairs, in Suite 802, Camille Hart was very aware of those cracks. She stood at the minibar, pouring herself a glass of water. No wine, no bourbon. She needed clarity, not comfort. Her mind wasn't spinning, it was sharpening. She didn't come here looking for confrontation. That had never been her way. Camille had built her entire empire on something quieter than power, presence. She had learned early on that the loudest person in the room was rarely the one with the most leverage. Her strength wasn't in volume. It was in stillness, in being undeniable. But tonight, they had denied her anyway, even with a reservation, even with proof, even with poise and professionalism. She had been reduced to a shadow of suspicion before she had said 10 words. And that kind of thing didn't happen by mistake. That kind of thing was systemic. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her posture straight, legs crossed at the ankle. She pulled out her phone. Not to tweet, not to threaten. She called the one number that would make every wall in the building vibrate. The line rang twice. Then a voice answered, deep and slightly groggy. "Camille?" "Hi, Mark," she said softly. "Sorry to call this late." "You're never sorry," he replied, then chuckled sleepily. "Where are you?" "In town. I checked into the Wellington Grand." A pause. Then, sharply, "Everything all right?" Camille leaned back. Let's just say, the front desk had a hard time believing Camille Hart had a right to a room. Another pause. This time longer. Mark Langston was her chief operating officer. More than that, he was a friend. One of the few people who had watched her climb her way to the top floor of an industry that still preferred its boardrooms white, male, and quietly smug. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. She did. She kept her voice even, matter of fact. She didn't dramatize. She didn't exaggerate. She just painted the picture detail by painful detail. And when she finished, Mark didn't curse, didn't huff and puff about lawsuits or headlines. He just sighed. The kind of sigh that comes after watching 1,000 small fires burn through the same forest. "I'll handle it," he said. "No rush," she replied. "Let them sleep on it tonight. Tomorrow we make the call." He didn't ask which call. They both already knew. The next morning, it was 8:03 a.m., when Lorne, the manager, got the call. He was barely in his office, still sipping his first coffee, when the front desk buzzed him. "Sir, line 3. It's someone from corporate." That phrase alone made his stomach churn. He picked up. "Lorne speaking." "Mr. Lorne, this is Mark Langston with Hartwell Hospitality Group. We need to talk." The tone was cold, crisp, like steel wrapped in velvet. Lorne sat down slowly. "Yes, of course. I was going to reach out about—" "Stop." One word. That was all it took. "You don't need to explain," Mark continued. "What matters is what happens next. And what happens next is this. The woman you turned away last night wasn't just a guest. She was your boss. She owns 24% of the Wellington brand portfolio. She signs the checks you cash." Lorne swallowed hard. I didn't." No, and that's exactly the problem. Silence. Mark, let it hang there. Let it rot. We're sending in a review team. Your entire staff will undergo implicit bias and equity training. Immediately. Your front desk staff will be reassigned. You'll submit a full incident report by end of business today. Do you understand? Yes, of course. One more thing, Mark added. Camille doesn't want your apology. She wants change. You're either part of that or you're part of the problem. That's your decision. And just like that, the call ended. Lorne stared at the silent receiver. His heart pounded. He was a company man. A career hotelier. The kind of guy who knew which fork belonged to which plate and how to fold a towel into a swan. But this was bigger than a misstep. This was a spotlight, and he was standing in the center of it, naked. Downstairs. The morning staff was starting to buzz. Derek hadn't come in. No one knew if he'd quit or been suspended. Rumors moved through the hotel like perfume light, but lingering. In the break room, Janice stirred her coffee without sipping it. Heard. She owns the place, Luis whispered. Like actually owns it. I could have told you she was somebody, Janice said. You could feel it. But people don't look at women like her and see power. They see trouble. She didn't even raise her voice. She didn't have to. Janice finally sipped her coffee and shook her head. Funny thing is, she added, the ones you dismiss the quickest tend to be the ones you regret ignoring. Upstairs, Camille was dressed in a soft gray blouse and tailored black slacks. Her suitcase was packed. She didn't plan to stay the second night. That had never been the plan. She opened the curtains. Light streamed into the room, bright, almost defiant. Below, the city moved like always. Taxis honking, people walking too fast, baristas scribbling names on cups. The world didn't know what had happened, but that didn't mean it hadn't happened. She picked up her phone and typed a quick message to her assistant. Book me at the Whitmore for the rest of the week. Send a statement draft to Mark. Then, she slipped her phone into her purse and rolled her suitcase toward the door. As she opened it, she found a young woman standing there with a nervous smile and a notepad. Miss Hart? The girl asked softly. She looked barely 20. South. Asian, curly hair pulled into a bun. Blazer 2 sizes too big. Camille raised an eyebrow. I'm Nia, the girl stammered. I just started here. Mr. Lorne asked if I could walk you down. Camille looked at her, then smiled gently. Of course, she said. They walked together in silence, but not awkward silence. Just quiet. When they reached the lobby, Camille paused. The space was less intimidating in daylight. More exposed. The marble didn't gleam as brightly. The chandeliers seemed a bit too much. The front desk looked almost small. People stared. Some smiled. Some looked away. Others pretended not to notice. Camille didn't flinch. She walked past them all, suitcase gliding behind her. But before she reached the door, she turned to Nia. Thank you, she said. Nia looked surprised. For what? For walking beside me. Not behind me. And not ahead. Nia blushed, eyes wide. Camille stepped through the doors into the morning. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because the next call had already been made, and this time, everyone upstairs was listening. The Wellington Grand had never been quiet. Even in the earliest hours of the morning, there was always movement room service carts gliding across hallways, housekeeping whispering down walkie-talkies, the soft hum of jazz lingering above the lobby like perfume. It was the kind of place that ran on luxury and choreography, where silence was rare, even discouraged. Silence meant someone had forgotten their role. But today, the silence wasn't an accident. It was a reaction, a hush that settled thick and invisible, clinging to corners and clacking heels. Not even the automatic doors at the front could swipe it away. It was the kind of silence that follows something true, the kind of truth that makes people look down at their shoes. Camille Hart had already left, but somehow her presence still echoed in every inch of the building. She hadn't yelled, hadn't demanded, hadn't cried or cursed or stomped out in rage. She had done something far more dangerous than all of that. She had been calm. And that calm had exposed them. The employees felt it first. Janice stood in the staff corridor holding a clean stack of towels, staring at the wall like it had just spoken. Her name. She had seen many things in her 12 years here. Fainting bridesmaids, drunk executives, the occasional celebrity scandal. But nothing shook her like watching Camille Hart stand in that lobby the night before. Silent, dignified, denied. I should have said something, she whispered aloud. She wasn't talking to anyone in particular. But Luis, walking by with a bell cart, stopped and turned toward her. Say something to who? To the girl at the front desk, Janice replied. To Derek. To the manager. Hell, to the woman in pearls who pretended she wasn't watching. Lise? Shifted awkwardly. Didn't seem like our place. Janice turned to face him. That's the problem, isn't it? We all keep thinking it's someone else's place to speak up. She looked down at the towels in her arms. Turns out, silence isn't neutral. It's permission. Back in the lobby, the tension was still there. Only now it wore a suit and carried a clipboard. Corporate had arrived. 2 representatives from Hartwell's equity and operations team were walking the floors, not smiling, not introducing themselves. To guests, they didn't need to. Everyone knew why they were here. One of them, a woman named Eliza with sharp eyes and no patience for fluff, stopped in front of the front desk. She didn't say anything, just watched the new agent nervous, clearly freshly trained hand a room key to a couple with the kind of cheerfulness that was trying too hard. As the couple walked off, Eliza leaned in and said flatly, How many implicit bias hours are in your onboarding? The young woman blinked. 2, I think. Bump it to 12, Eliza replied. Starting this week. She turned on her heel before the girl could respond. In the manager's office, Lorne sat at his desk, staring at the incident report draft he had rewritten 4 times. Each version started differently. Each version sounded like an apology, but none of them sounded like the truth. The truth was, he had seen her. He had walked into the lobby just as the incident was unfolding. He saw Camille standing there, suitcase in hand, posture elegant, face still. And he had hesitated not because he didn't know who she was, but because for half a second, his brain agreed with the assumption Derek had made. That's what haunted him. He hadn't just arrived too late. He had arrived with a bias already sitting quietly in the passenger seat of his mind. She didn't look like wealth. She didn't look like authority. She didn't look like someone who could own a portion of the very carpet she stood on. And for that one breath of a second, he had hesitated. Mr. Lorne? He looked up. It was Neha, the new intern from guest services. Yes? There's someone here from the press. He stood up so fast, he knocked over his chair. Tell them we're not taking questions. She said she's not here for a quote, Neha replied calmly. She said she's here to observe and take notes. Lorne sat back down slowly. The walls were closing in, and no one had raised their voice. In the lobby cafe. The conversations were different now. They weren't about spa packages or wine pairings. They were about her. Did you hear what happened? One woman asked her friend over lattes. She owns a piece of this place. Wait, seriously? The friend replied. I thought she was, like, just someone trying to sneak in. Because she was black? The first woman asked, not unkindly. There was a pause. I didn't say that, the friend replied, looking down at her cup. No, the first woman said quietly. But you did. Neither of them spoke for a long time after that. And then there was the man in the gray suit. He had been in the lobby that night, sitting near the concierge desk, watching the scene unfold while pretending to read a newspaper. He had assumed she was trouble. Maybe someone trying to hustle the front desk. Maybe a social media stunt. But when she pulled out that card, the temperature in his chest dropped 10 degrees. He remembered the look in her eyes, calm, steady, piercing. Like she had seen this movie too many times and was done trying to edit it. He stood now at the concierge desk, awkward and unsure. Was that woman really the CEO? He asked quietly. The concierge, a middle-aged black man who'd worked there for 8 years, didn't smile. Didn't nod. He simply said, "She's more than that." Then he handed the man a city map and walked away. Later that afternoon, in a second-floor conference room, all department heads were called in for an emergency meeting. No refreshments. No jokes. Just chairs. A screen. And a name on the projector. Bias. Isn't always loud. A conversation we've delayed too long. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lorne stood at the front, pale but composed. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to acknowledge what happened last night." No one looked directly at him, but everyone listened. A woman walked in with grace, with dignity, with every right to be here, and we failed her. Not because she was loud, not because she asked for too much, but because we assumed she didn't belong. He paused. That assumption came from somewhere, and if we don't confront it, we're complicit in it. No one clapped. This wasn't a speech for applause. It was a confession. And in the silence that followed, something inside the room cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a kind of soft devastation that told them this wasn't about policy anymore. This was about character. Later that evening, Neha stood outside the hotel as the sun began to set. She looked down at the sidewalk where Camille had stood the night before. Same rain, same concrete. Different awareness. Inside, the hotel's rhythm had resumed. Check-ins, keys handed out, concierge calls. The music played again, but something was different. It wasn't just that people were more polite. It was that they were aware of being watched. Not by security. But by their own reflections. And that was the beginning of change. Not the end. Not justice, but the beginning. The Wellington Grand had always stood tall. Physically, of course, 32 floors of glass and stone and quiet luxury, but also symbolically. It was one of those places where people whispered the name in dinner parties and linked it with prestige. It had been built to look timeless, as if money could keep bricks from crumbling. But on this morning, that illusion began to crack, not from protests, not from viral videos. From an email. It went out at 7:04 a.m. Subject line, statement from Hartwell. Hospitality group. Inside were just 5 short paragraphs. Clear, cold, controlled. We are aware of an incident involving one of our senior executives who was denied service at a Hartwell property based on inaccurate assumptions and failure to uphold our core values. At Hartwell, we do not tolerate discrimination, overt or unconscious. We expect our partners and staff to uphold the highest standards of equity, dignity, and respect for all individuals. The Wellington Grand has failed to meet those standards. Effective immediately, we are initiating an internal review, suspending regional leadership at the affected site, and launching a mandatory training initiative across all properties. This is not damage control. This is course correction. It wasn't a dramatic statement. No all caps. No threats. No HASHTAGS. But in the corporate world, it hit like a seismic tremor. By 8 a.m., the hospitality news boards lit up. Hartwell CEO turned away by her own hotel chain. Bias in the Lobby. Camille Hart and the moment that sparked a reckoning. Silence at check-in. What happens when the guest is the boss? By 9:30 a.m., the company's internal Slack channels buzzed with nervous emojis and quiet, "Did you see this?" messages. Some people were confused. Others were angry. A few were smug, as if they'd known this day was coming. But no one could deny it anymore. Camille Hart had turned an ordinary night into an extraordinary accountability test, and the company had just passed it. But barely dotted Hartwell HQ, in a sleek building lined with matte glass and minimalist art, a different kind. A storm was brewing. Board members were on calls. Legal was reviewing language. HR was in overdrive. But in her corner office on the 27th floor, Camille Hart sat alone. She hadn't spoken to the press. She hadn't posted a thing. She hadn't even returned most of her texts. Instead, she sat with a cup of black coffee and stared out the window. Smug. Not satisfied. Just still. There were no meetings on her calendar. No photo ops. No PR stunts. Just silence. Because she knew something most people didn't. Change doesn't always scream. Sometimes it creeps in quietly and makes people uncomfortable without ever raising its voice. A knock came at the door. It was Mark. Her cool. He looked like he hadn't slept. Shirt rumpled. Tie loosened. But his eyes were sharp. "I've seen earthquakes." "That moved slower than this," he said, taking a seat across from her. Camille didn't smile. "It had to happen." He nodded. "You shook the foundation." "No," she said, finally meeting his gaze. "The foundation was already cracked. I just turned on the light." Meanwhile, back at the Wellington Grand, the fallout was visible. In every hallway, a new manager had flown in overnight. Ava Morgan, a no-nonsense executive from Hartwell's Boston property. She was known across the company as the fixer. Wherever she went, things got repaired or replaced. Ava didn't wait for introductions. By 10 a.m., she had the entire hotel staff in the conference room. No muffins. No coffee. Just truth. "I'm not here to make friends," she said, walking slowly past the rows of nervous employees. "I'm not here to shame anyone either. But I am here to rebuild what was broken, and make no mistake, something here is very broken." No one dared to interrupt. "You think this is about one woman at the front desk?" she continued. "It's not. It's about a system that made that woman feel like she had the right to judge someone based on how they looked, before even checking their name." Ava's tone wasn't angry. It was surgical, precise. "I've read your training manuals. They talk about professionalism, about brand image, but nowhere in those pages does it say, only offer 5-star service to people who look the part." A few people lowered their eyes. Others shifted uncomfortably. "You're not being punished," she added. "You're being asked to do better. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. That's how change starts." Derek, the young man who had denied Camille a room, sat in his apartment, staring blankly at the news story plastered across his laptop. He hadn't been fired yet, but he was on unpaid leave pending investigation. The article didn't mention his name, but he could feel it anyway, burning under his skin. He hadn't meant to be racist. He hadn't even thought he was. He told himself it was a mistake, a glitch, a misunderstanding. But deep down, he knew better. He hadn't seen Camille. He had seen a problem, a question mark, a maybe. And now? Now he was the question mark. He sat there, phone buzzing with texts from friends, but none of them made him feel better. Because all he could hear, over and over, was what Camille had said. Not a misunderstanding, a system. And worse than that, she was right. By late afternoon, Hartwell's shares had actually gone up, not by much, but enough to raise eyebrows. Some called it the Camille effect. Analysts said it was because the company responded swiftly, clearly, and with purpose. Others said it was because the public finally saw a company admit fault without spinning it into fluff. But insiders knew the truth. It was because integrity, when rare, is a valuable currency. And Camille Hart had just invested all of hers. At a nearby hotel, the Whitmore. Camille checked into a modest suite. Not too large, not too flashy. The front desk agent, a young woman with braids and a warm smile, didn't recognize her, and that's exactly what Camille wanted. "Welcome to the Whitmore, Ms. Hart," the woman said, sliding over a keycard. "We're glad you're here." Camille smiled, genuine this time. "So am I." As she rode the elevator up, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Same scarf, same suitcase. Same woman who was told she didn't belong just 24 hours ago. But everything had changed, because now the world was watching. Not her. But itself. Later that night, a private memo was sent to all Hartwell managers around the country. It read, "In every lobby, someone is watching. It may not be camera. It may not be a guest. But someone will notice when you fail to welcome them. And one day, that someone may be the very person who owns the floor beneath your feet. Lead with humility. Serve with dignity. Assume nothing." And under the memo, Camille had added one line in her own handwriting. "Power doesn't always knock." A week had passed since the lobby went quiet, but the weight of that silence hadn't lifted. The Wellington Grand still sparkled. Guests still checked in. Coffee still steamed behind the cafe counter, and bellhops still moved briskly through the gleaming halls. But something beneath all that polish had shifted like a hairline fracture just below the surface. Invisible but undeniable. The staff felt it. The guests sensed it. And now, Camille Hart was coming back. Not with press. Not with photographers. Not even with her corporate entourage. Just her. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. Mandatory. No exceptions. Every employee from concierge to maintenance was required to attend. For the first time in the hotel's history, breakfast. Service would shut down early. In the main conference room, usually reserved for bridal expos and travel. Agent Mixer's rows of beige chairs had been arranged in a semicircle. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and anticipation. On the projection screen, no logos. No slides. Just a simple message typed in white on a black background. Listen first. By 9:55 a.m., the room was nearly full. Janice sat in the second row, arms folded. She had worn her cleanest uniform and tied her graying hair in a neat twist. Beside her, Louise fidgeted with a pen. The girl from the front desk, Nia, sat a few seats away, wide-eyed, nervous, and clearly unsure what to expect. There was no stage, no microphone, just a chair in the center, unoccupied. Until she walked in. Camille. No security, no announcement, no grand entrance, just the soft click of heels and the whisper of fabric as she moved calmly through the aisle. She wore a deep blue blouse, simple slacks, and flats. Her scarf was gone today. Her natural hair was out, shaped into a rounded crown that framed her face like a halo of quiet defiance. She stopped in front of the room, looked at them, through them, at them. She didn't need to ask for attention. She already had it. Then she pulled the chair to the middle of the room and sat. Not on the stage. Among them. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I know you didn't have a choice, but thank you anyway." Her voice was warm, low, unthreatening, yet it carried like thunder under the surface. "I'm not here to scold anyone," she said. "I'm not here to give you a corporate speech. You've heard enough of those, I'm sure." A few heads nodded. "I'm here because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to work long hours, to deal with difficult guests, to smile through exhaustion, to be overlooked by people who think their money makes them better. There were surprised glances. Camille continued. I started my career in hospitality as a night clerk at a roadside inn. I cleaned rooms, changed linens, even unclogged toilets once. I've served people who called me the wrong name, who never looked me in the eye, who assumed I was lazy or dumb or worse. She looked down for a moment, then back up. But last week, she said, I walked into a hotel I partly own, and I was told I didn't belong. A few staff members visibly stiffened. Others looked away. And that moment, she added, wasn't shocking to me. It was familiar. She let the words sit there. Familiar. That's the saddest part. Camille leaned forward. I didn't come back to make an example out of anyone. I came back because we cannot fix what we refuse to face. And the truth is, this industry, the whole hospitality world has a problem. She gestured gently toward them. And it lives in rooms like this. Nobody interrupted. Nobody moved. You've been told what professionalism looks like, she said. You've been taught to trust your instincts, to spot suspicious behavior, to maintain the brand's image. But what you were never taught, what most of us were never taught, is how much our instincts have been shaped by prejudice. She glanced toward a young white man in the third row. I'm not saying you're bad people, she said. I'm saying we've all been breathing in smoke for so long, we don't even know there's a fire. A few people nodded, slowly. It's not just about what happened to me, she added. It's about the dozens of other guests who didn't have a business card to hand over. The ones who walked out quietly. The ones who internalized your doubt as truth about who they are. Her voice didn't tremble, but it pressed hard on every soul in the room. I'm not angry, she said. I'm heartbroken. Because the first reaction that night wasn't curiosity. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't, let me help you. It was, she doesn't belong here. Camille exhaled, softly. I don't want your guilt, she said. I want your reflection. She stood up then, not towering, just present. You don't need to memorize policies to be decent. You don't need to attend a seminar to show someone dignity. You just have to pause before the assumption. Breathe before the judgment. Listen before the label. She walked toward the door, then turned once more. Some of you might be angry, I came back. Some of you might be relieved. But either way, I hope you never forget this feeling. She pointed to her chest, because I carry it with me. Every day. And with that, no applause, no dramatic exit. Camille walked out. The room was silent for a long time. Then Janice stood not quickly, but with intention. I saw her that night, she said aloud. Everyone turned toward her. I didn't say a word, just kept folding napkins and watching. She looked down. I told myself it wasn't my place, that I couldn't change anything. But what she said today. Janice paused. I don't want to be someone who folds silence into linens anymore. Luis cleared his throat. Me neither. Others nodded. Neha wiped her cheek. Later that day, staff began to write messages on note cards placed in the break room, something Ava, the interim manager, had suggested. On one card, someone scribbled, before you judge, ask yourself who taught you to look away. On another, she didn't make a scene, she made a mirror. And another, unsigned, thank you for coming back. You didn't have to. But we're better, because you did. That night, Camille sat in her car outside the hotel for a full 5 minutes before pulling away. She didn't go back inside. She didn't need to, because sometimes the most powerful meetings don't end with applause. They end with reflection. And reflection, when honest, is the first step toward repair. Change didn't arrive with confetti or headlines. It didn't barge in like a wrecking ball, or burn down the lobby. That arrived quietly. Like new air in an old room. And over the next month, the Wellington Grand breathed it and Dot. It started with the young. Handbook. Within 2 weeks of Camille's meeting, the employee manual was rewritten, not edited, not lightly revised, but overhauled. Every paragraph was re-evaluated. Every policy scrutinized through a different lens. Gone were vague phrases, like professional appearance and appropriate guest profile. In their place were new sections titled, Unconscious Bias in Hospitality. Who do you see? First, Breaking the Default Gaze. Presence before Assumption. Each section opened with a true stories submitted by staff anonymously. One was about a man turned away because he had tattoos and worn-out shoes. Another was about a single mother who walked in with 2 loud kids and was treated like a liability, not a guest. And of course, one story was about a woman in a blue raincoat with a name one believed belonged to her. Camille never once asked to be in the handbook. She didn't need to. Her story had already rewritten the place. The next change came from the top. Hartwell Hospitality launched a company-wide initiative called The Invisible Guest, a rotating program where C-suite executives booked rooms under pseudonyms, dressed down, and arrived unannounced at properties they owned. They wouldn't reveal their identities. They wouldn't flash cards. They would simply show up and see who was watching at first. Some staff called it a gimmick, but then came the memo. From corporate, these are not tests. These are truths. The way we treat people when we think they have nothing to offer us? That's the standard we're being measured by. A few managers grumbled. A few employees worried they'd be fired for one mistake, but most leaned in. Something about it felt right, like a broken compass finally being adjusted, at Wellington. Changes happened fast, but not carelessly. The front desk underwent retraining. But this time, it wasn't about upselling suites or memorizing high-value guest profiles. It was about awareness. Each agent was required to attend 6 sessions, titled simply, Your Eyes Lie. The sessions were raw, honest, and uncomfortable. They showed security footage of previous interactions, not just Camille's, but countless others that had been overlooked. Guests turned away with polite words but cold faces. Bellhops, who skipped certain families while offering others extra. Umbrellas. Bar staff, who checked IDs more often for guests who looked off. These weren't explosive acts of discrimination. They were quiet, polished. Socially acceptable cruelty. And that's what made them so dangerous. One training facilitator put it best, racism rarely announces itself. It nods. It assumes. It redirects. After the 3rd session, a young white staffer named Macy raised her hand and asked, What do we do when we see bias in others? The facilitator paused. Start by seeing it in yourself. Macy didn't speak for the rest of the session, but she stayed after and signed up to lead the next workshop. Janice Longtime, housekeeper and silent witness to Camille's first visit, found herself asked to join the hotel's newly formed Equity Circle, a small group of employees from different departments who met weekly to flag incidents, share observations, and propose changes. She was hesitant at first. I'm not a policy person, she told Ava Morgan, the interim GM. I'm a towel-folding, guest-tracking, coffee-stained fighting kind of person. Ava smiled. Exactly why? We need you. So Janice joined at the first meeting. She listened more than she spoke. But by the 3rd, she was the one who said, Why don't we let new hires shadow guests, instead of just shadowing staff? Everyone turned. Let them walk in from the street. Get ignored. Be mistaken. Be sized up, she said. Then they'll understand. The idea was implemented within 2 weeks. It worked better than anyone expected. Derek never came back. Officially. He resigned to pursue other opportunities. But the truth was, he wasn't ready to return, and no one pressured him to in his absence. The role was filled by a young woman named Zara, Nigerian American, sharp, warm, observant. On her first day, she wore a pin on her blazer that read simply, "Lead with listening." It was her own phrase. She'd used it at her last job, where she helped de-escalate more conflicts with empathy than security ever could. When asked by a guest if she was new to this kind of hotel, she smiled and said, "No, just new to places that expect me to be invisible." She became a favorite among regulars within a week, not because she bent rules, but because she saw people, and they saw her back. Even the architecture changed. Camille never asked for a plaque. No one did, but one morning, a new art installation appeared in the Wellington Grand's lobby. It wasn't flashy. Just a bronze outline of a woman walking forward, coat in hand, suitcase rolling behind her. Beneath it, etched in brass, were the words, "She didn't demand a room. She reminded us who owned the building." Most guests didn't notice it, but the staff did. Every day. It became the meeting spot for breaks, the starting point for new hire tours. Someone even started calling it the Standard. As in, "I'll meet you by the Standard before shift change." And slowly, over time, the name stuck. One evening, Neha, the young guest services trainee, found herself assisting a woman in her late 60s who spoke with a heavy accent and clutched a plastic shopping bag as a purse. The system had flagged her reservation as prepaid but non-refundable due to a third-party site error. Normally, the front desk would have simply apologized and moved on, but Nia paused, looked at the woman. Really looked, and said, "We're going to figure this out together." She made 2 calls, pulled in a supervisor, spent nearly 30 minutes, and got her a room. No upgrades. No grand gestures. Just dignity. When the woman got her key, she leaned in and whispered, "You remind me of someone I used to know. She taught me to carry myself like I already belonged." Neha smiled. She didn't know for sure if the woman had meant Camille, but something in her chest told her yes. Back at headquarters, Camille received weekly updates on every change implemented across Hartwell's hotels. She never demanded numbers. She asked for stories. Because she knew culture doesn't change when rules change. Culture changes when stories change. And now, thanks to a rainy night and a lobby that forgot itself, as stories were starting to sound different. Not perfect, but better, more human, more seen. Months had passed. Spring had melted into summer, and the rain had stopped being so persistent. But in the minds of those who worked at the Wellington Grand, that night never really ended. The woman with the rain-speckled coat and calm eyes still lived somewhere in the air, like a whispered truth that kept the walls honest. Camille hadn't been back since the staff meeting. Not in person. Not with cameras or announcements or follow-up press. She hadn't needed to return because her presence never really left. The bronze figure by the lobby wall, the Standard, had become more than a sculpture. It was now a kind of sacred landmark among the employees. People paused there before shifts, leaned on it after long hours, even whispered confessions to it. No one dared touch it with fingerprints. Somehow, even the janitorial staff without being told knew to clean around it gently, reverently. New hires were given a 5-minute story about it during onboarding. Not mandatory, not rehearsed, but always personal. She didn't yell, Janice would say. She just showed up and made the whole place look at itself. And every time the story was told, something softened in the listener. Like the muscle that holds assumptions had been asked to unclench. Camille, meanwhile, sat in a sun-drenched corner of her home office in Chicago. The city moved outside her window, but she moved slower now. More intentional. There were still emails, board meetings, site inspections, shareholder calls, but fewer of them. More time went to the quiet work, the real work, She had turned her experience into something unexpected, a leadership fellowship called Second Looks. It was designed for rising managers in the hospitality industry to explore one simple idea. What if you questioned your first thought every time? The program was small, selective, deep. Camille read every application herself, not because she didn't trust her team, but because the people who came forward with their stories of bias, shame, assumption, redemption, were telling the truth in a way numbers never could. One day, a handwritten letter arrived by mail from Nia. She had been promoted to guest services lead at the Wellington Grand. In her letter, she wrote, "Sometimes I still see her standing there. Even though I wasn't the one who turned her away, I felt the weight of it. Now, every time someone walks through those doors, I ask myself, would I have seen her? I don't always have the answer, but I always ask. That's because of you. Thank you for walking in even when you didn't have a room." Camille folded the letter with care, placed it in a small wooden box on her bookshelf, labeled reminders. Not awards, not certificates, just words from those who'd been changed. Back at the Wellington Grand, something else had begun to shift. Guests started noticing subtle differences, nothing flashy, just small gestures that felt unusually human. Front desk agents no longer offered greetings by default titles. Instead of "Welcome, Mr. or Ms.," they asked, "What name do you prefer to go by?" Bellhops made eye contact, remembered details, took note of how people looked when they were tired, not just wealthy. Housekeepers were given a voice in weekly team meetings, and Zara, the sharp, soft-spoken woman now running the front desk, kept a journal in her drawer. Whenever a guest arrived who looked nervous, out of place, or ignored by others, she wrote about them, not their names, just the feeling they brought. She titled the journal, "Those Who Shouldn't Have to Ask Twice." Then came one particular afternoon in August. The kind where the sky looked like it had been stretched out with gold, and everything moved slower. Families came in from vacation. Business people moved in and out of elevators. Tourists stood in front of the sculpture and asked about its meaning. And around 4 p.m., a woman entered the lobby. She had a small rolling bag, scuffed at the edges, a white sweater with a small stain on the sleeve. Her curls were pulled into a low bun. Her posture was polite, but unsure. She walked to the desk, hesitating as she reached into her coat for a printout. Zara noticed the shoes first, sensible, worn, clean. "Hi there," she said with warmth. "Checking in?" The woman nodded. "Yes, I think so. My son booked it for me, but I'm not sure if—" Zara didn't wait for her to finish. "We'll take care of it," she said gently. "You're in the right place." She reached for the system, looked up the name, and nodded. "Got you right here," she said. "Room 406, late checkout included. Do you need help with your bag?" The woman's face softened. "No one ever offers to help," she said quietly. "They usually just look at me funny." Zara didn't miss a beat. "Well," she said, smiling, "we don't look. We see." The woman blinked, visibly moved, then whispered, "You remind me of someone." Zara didn't ask who. She already knew. That evening, as the sunset spilled through the tall glass windows, a quiet moment unfolded. Lise, the bellhop, was off duty. He wandered into the lobby, tired but curious. He had heard the sculpture had been polished again, new lights installed above it, so it now glowed gently at night. He stood before it, hands in his pockets. Read the brass words once more. She didn't demand a room. She reminded us who owned the building. He thought about that night, about how he hadn't said a word, about how he had watched, silently, like so many others. And now, he was part of a place that asked questions, that second-guessed its instincts, that changed its default setting from doubt to dignity. He looked at the bronze outline coat in one hand, suitcase in the other, and whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" Back in Chicago, Camille sat outside on her porch, the sky pink above her. She didn't check the headlines anymore. She didn't need to track the policy memos or read the reports. She had something better. Letters from staff, whispers from friends. And something no one could ever take back, the knowledge that presence, pure, unapologetic presence, had changed an entire ecosystem. She never screamed, never threatened, never held a press conference. She had simply walked into a space that wasn't ready for her and left it better than she found it. Not with force, but with truth. She had checked in without a room. And yet somehow she never left. Asterisk. She never asked for special treatment. Only fairness. But when fairness is denied and dignity tested, true power isn't in retaliation, it's in restraint. Camille Hart walked out that night, but her presence never left the room. If this story stirred something in you, share it. And if you want more stories that shine light into the corners, we often overlook, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the smallest moments leave the biggest impact.